Welcome aboard the RSS commentary on Tuesday, June 29th, 2021. I am your host, the Captain. And in our top story, the Biden administration and NSA have been spying on Fox News and Tucker Carlson, according to a whistleblower who came forward with secret knowledge that existed in emails about a story that hadn't been released yet. And California has banned state travel to 5 states over trans athlete laws. Yes, you heard that right. The California Democrats are not happy with your use of gender pronouns, and they are coming to nanny your state. But before we get started, RSS Commentary is an indie news organization. If you find any factual errors in this news broadcast, you can report them at rsscommentary.com/issue 134 for this show, where you can find links to our YouTube channel, Twitter, and you can also make a donation at the bottom of the page or leave your factual corrections in the comment section down below. You can also go to rsscommentary.com/donate to make a donation via PayPal. Moving on into our top story of the night. Tucker Carlson claims that the NSA is spying on him. This is coming at you from the New York Post. Fox News host Tucker Carlson is accusing the Biden administration of surveying his private communications in an effort to get his show yanked from air. Carlson made the accusation on his show Monday night, saying that he had been contacted by a whistleblower who had information that came from his text and emails regarding a story his team was working on. So this wouldn't be anything new for the Biden crime family. If you remember when Trump said Obama had his wires tapped, everybody thought he was crazy, like he didn't know what he was talking about, like they don't have wires anymore. And as it turned out, it was true. You can look up the deep state FBI agent or attorney, Kevin Kleinsmith. He was the guy who filed those fake documents to get the FISA warrant to survey Trump Tower. He didn't actually do any jail time, but he was convicted of the fraud upon the court, which is very, very, very difficult to convict attorneys of. Trust me, I've actually tried this in the past with attorneys who've actually done legitimate things that were really bad, and it's incredibly hard. It is very hard. So kudos to that guy for exposing the deep state, which most people think is a conspiracy theory, but it's actually not. Dual state is actually an official terminology, and in America we call them deep state, but they're the same thing. In every single country, there are epicenters of power where there are people who live in that area, and they tend to develop crony networks where they will hire their friends and family, and they eventually will form a dual state when their crony network gets corrupt enough. So in America, the swamp is in Washington, D.C. Most of the people who work for the federal government live in and around Washington, D.C., and for the military. And the people who live in Washington, D.C. are mostly Democrats. They have this critical race theory culture because they have all of the law influence there. And critical race theory came from critical legal studies, which is an offshoot of critical theory, which is like a Marxist dialectical materialism perversion of logic. There's a whole family of these critical theories, like critical gender theory, which states that the white supremacist women back when America was racist were the victims, that the patriarchy oppressed them, and it wasn't actually the white women who were crazy racist. It was the patriarchy of white males that was at fault. So under critical gender and race theory, which is AKA white feminism, the white women are both simultaneously the oppressors and the oppressed at the same time, which is why one of many reasons why critical race theory is garbage. So the people who work for the deep state, or who are in a part of the deep state, the people who live in and around the Washington, D.C. area, who have been exposed to this critical race and gender theory in law school, through a formal class, or through one of these anti-white racist belittling sessions where they tell that you have white privilege and that you have a disease called whiteness, and that this disease manifests itself in white rage when you are exhibiting signs of white fragility, which is when the whiteness is the story that the white people tell themselves to justify their oppressor role, and victimizing the quote unquote people of color, or i.e. the diverse people, and that the country is systemically racist because there's poor black people in big cities run by Democrats. So they can't really just tell these people, well, you're a complete fuck up. You did horribly in school. You did a bunch of drugs, partied. You got in a bunch of trouble with the cops. When most employers get your resume, they throw it in the trash. They can't say that because the Democrats are trying to get them to vote for them. And if they did tell them that, well, they would probably vote for Republicans, because the higher percent of college educated you are, the higher percent chance, if you're black, the higher percent chance you are to vote for Republicans, and vice versa for white people and Democrats. So they have this culture where they blame everything on the white males because it's a mixture of critical race theory and critical gender theory, also known as white feminism. And they have been targeting people, so they have been lashing out at the Republicans over January 6th in a desperate last-ditch effort to divert people from all of the race rioting from the Burn, Loot, Murder Club that has been terrorizing the United States with their race rioting funded by donations from Act Blue, the Democrat fundraising scam, and the Black Lives Foundation, which is a Marxist organization that has been in the news because the founders have been purchasing multiple millions of dollars worth of houses that are owned by the Black Lives Matter Foundation. So they just use them. So it's obviously appears that this is a scam, but they can't accept the blame for this, because the Democrats are run, most of them live in big cities that are run in large part by public sector employee unions like the teachers unions and SEIU and AFL-CIO. And in the big cities, the rent is so damn high that most people who live there have only been there for less than 6 years. They went to get that dream job in the big city. They worked their butt off in college and got themselves in a bunch of debt. And now they're going to go pay off their college debt. And so they moved over to the big city to work for the big tech companies. And they found that it was a debt trap. They started, after a few years, to realize that they were always broke, even though they were making $100,000 or more dollars per year. And the way that the scam works in the big cities is that one of the only groups that is guaranteed to be there are the public sector employee unions, because everybody else said that the rent was too damn high, and they went to a city like Eugene, Oregon, and then they jacked up our rent over here. And so in the big cities, the people who are left there are pretty much slaves. And because it's mostly Democrats who live in the big cities, if you go against their groupthink heterodoxy, which means everyone has the same orthodoxy, then they will fire you. And most people are just trying to get by, and they can't afford to get whacked. They can't afford to get canceled. So they tend to not say anything about it. And so the people who are at the top, like the Hollywood celebrities and the political snakes, they continue with this critical race theory, blaming the white people for the sins of slavery, as if all of the slaves in America were white or were black, which isn't true, because in the first days of America, almost all the slaves were white, with the exception of some American Indians, and the African slaves didn't start showing up until later. Only 4% of the transatlantic slave trade went to America. About half the slaves were actually white. Yes, the white slaves were not in chattel slavery, but this also means that they were not worth as much money. And when they were taken to the United States, they were treated much worse. Many of the prisoners were treated the worst. And America was, around the Civil War times, was less than 24 million population. And then now it's about 330 million. Most Americans immigrated to the United States after the Civil War from countries that opposed slavery, such as Ireland and Germany, which is a landlocked country. They didn't like the transatlantic slave trade because it helped the coastal countries and it did not help Germany. So they were abolitionists. They were not racist people. Actually, that's a misnomer. People think Germans, World War II, pre-World War II era, that the Germans were racist. This is actually not true. The Germans actually engaged in trade relationships with Africa to make up for the fact that they were landlocked. So this critical race theory is based on this false narrative of history, where the white people are bad, where colonialism is bad, where because colonialism, the colonialists are blamed for all of the problems in the world. But the reality is that the colonialists exported English common law to the everywhere where they went. And the countries that got the English common law today are the rich countries. The countries that did not get the English common law, they are authoritarian despots, where the locals there pillaged all the resources because they were extremely corrupt. So the colonialists might have been slightly brutal at some points in time, but the native people too also were equally as brutal. It's not just the white people that were brutal. Slavery came from Africa. They have a very long history of mass murdering slaves in Africa. When they have a lot of slaves that they didn't have to pay for, then these slaves were often murdered with the master whenever the master died. The slaves were mostly used for farm labor. So if they did not have the people working on the farms, everyone would have died. So they like to say that the Western world is built on the backs of slaves, but it's not actually true. The Western world was actually built on the backs of machines that freed slaves. This is the problem with this critical race theory, is that it's a way of looking at the world where you're blaming the white people for everything. And it tends to just be a false perception that they're happening. So the deep state is sold on the critical race theory and the critical gender theory. And they are, they're utilizing their power and their privilege in order to try to negate the negation in Marxist dialectical materialism by attacking shows like Fox News' Tucker Carlson. And so let's watch this interview with Tucker Carlson. This is
political protesters the government is spying on. Yesterday, we heard from a whistleblower within the U.S. government who reached out to warn us that the NSA, the National Security Agency,
sorry.
Our electronic communications and leak them in an attempt to take this show off the air. Now, that's a shocking claim. Ordinarily, illegal for the NSA to spy on American citizens. It's a crime. It's not a third world country. Things like that should not happen in America.
Sorry about that. I had a
But it's not just political
OBS
protesters
issue there.
the government is spying on. Yesterday, we heard from a whistleblower within the U.S. government who reached out to warn us that the NSA, the National Security Agency, is monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take this show off the air. Now, that's a shocking claim, and ordinarily we'd be skeptical of it. It's illegal for the NSA to spy on American citizens. It's a crime. It's not a third world country. Things like that should not happen in America. But unfortunately, they do happen, and in this case, they did happen. The whistleblower, who is in a position to know, repeated back to us information about a story that we are working on that could have only come directly from my texts and emails. There's no other possible source for that information, period. The NSA captured that information without our knowledge and did it for political reasons. The Biden administration is spying on us. We have confirmed that. This morning, we filed a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request, asking for all information that the NSA and other agencies have gathered about this show. We did it mostly as a formality. We've also contacted the press office at both NSA and the FBI. We don't expect to hear much back. That's the way that usually goes. Only Congress can force transparency on the intelligence agencies, and they should do that immediately. Spying on opposition journalists is incompatible with democracy. If they are doing it to us, and
well, it depends on whether or not you want to define democracy as late-stage capitalism, in which case I think there would be a case to actually be made that, yes, you can actually expect that in democracy in late-stage capitalism.
Again, they are definitely doing it to us. They are almost certainly doing it to others. This is scary, and we need to stop it right away.
Okie dokie. So those are some big accusations. I trust this person. I do not think that they're going to risk the reputation of Fox News with this. It does also sound like stuff that Obama did when he tapped Trump's wires at Trump Tower. You should be afraid of this because the deep state is real. You cannot deny that there are people who work for the federal government who took some classes in critical race theory. And if you're not familiar with this, critical race theory is a very specific thing. It's not just whatever you want to say it is. It's this body of research based around this idea that white people have victimized the non-whites, as if you took the white people out of the situation and the black people would be rich. They would be like doing just as well as the white people. This is silly. But to them, they've bought this pill because they've been pushing this narrative in the public schools because it's been popularized by Hollywood through the hip hop music, movies, pop culture, and it's been propped up in large part by liberals. It is actually liberals who have been pushing this view of black people as these hip hoppers who don't have to comply. They're like the thugs that they're like hard and they got tattoos and dreadlocks and like some gold teeth, and they've probably robbed a bunch of people, but they write raps about it, so it's cool. And they make the white girls freak, twerk, and shake their butts and pull their tits out. So this doesn't start in a vacuum, and definitely the conservatives, the white kids out in the country who are the supposed racists, they definitely too are at fault because the country boys be bumping that hip hop and wearing some G'd out looking clothes, riding in their big pickup truck with their cowboy boots and cowboy hat or their trucker hat. You know it. You know you're guilty too. You know you like hip hop music. But the problem is that our pop culture makes it so that women view down upon nerds. I'm a software and computer engineer and an entrepreneur, so I know all about how much the women don't like computer programmers because they don't understand what we're talking about. Sometimes they feel like you're trying to condescend them if you're talking about science stuff and they don't understand the words. It's like a different world for them, so they think that, the programmers want to stay in this world all the time and that they don't open up, that they're always speaking Greek or Latin. And this really isn't true. But the ways that black people can think of to get famous or to get out of the hood, to rise up out of the gang life, get off of food stamps and welfare. The ways that they think about this are typically becoming a professional athlete or a rapper, or they might think about going to one of those, not a community college, but like a private college like ITT, or the problem is that when you think about really smart people, they don't often think about black people. But if you look up this guy named Thomas Sowell, he's one of my idols. He is a economist, studied at Harvard, grew up in the middle of Jim Crow in Harlem. He had it much harder than the people did today. And he became one of the world's most famous economists. And so this guy obviously is one of the smartest guys in the room. Every single place where he goes, everybody looks up to this guy. So it's not like black Americans aren't capable of doing this. It's a cultural thing. It's the people up in the big city. They want people to pay attention to them. They want to get likes on social media. They want to get laid. They want to go to the dope party. And they want to ride in their friend's car with the banging sound system. And they want to get the hot, rich, white girlfriend and then have them twerk and then hook up with her best friend and maybe tag team her mom. But the thing that doesn't pop up on the radar with these hood people is mathematics, science, technology, and engineering. And this is fundamentally the core of why the black people in the big cities are not doing well. It's not that they're getting fewer education dollars. This is a old wives' tale. It's not actually true. In fact, actually, blacks in the big city get about 3% more education dollars. So it's not that they're not getting the funds. It's not that they aren't given the adequate supplies, because the Chinese and other countries are doing a lot more with a lot less. The problem is that the teachers' unions are rotten, that the public education system is rotten, because with government programs, the problem is that it doesn't matter whether or not these people, the government program provides you with the product that works for you, that's good, like a business has to. Like a business will go to bankrupt if they don't provide you with a good product. The government, on the other hand, the people who work for the government were put there by politicians. They're not there to make a good product, to make the government function correctly. They're there for a job, and they only care about enforcing the orders and implementing them. And if you bring up all of the faults and you try to change it, then they're probably going to try to get rid of you. The government is very inflexible, and it doesn't matter whether or not their programs cause people to die, to become impoverished, to live miserable lives, to not be as well off as their parents. These people will continue to, as long as the politicians are getting elected, they will continue to keep their job, and you will continue to get a bad product into the future. And this is why charter schools do a better job, because they can more emulate what the private schools do. Most rich people send their children to private schools. They don't send their kids to public schools. Public schools are where you send your kid if you want them to get indoctrinated into this critical race and gender theory, so that they can blame other people for the situation they're in, so that they can go party, smoke marijuana, drink alcohol, snort cocaine off of slutty white chicks' tits. Trust me, I've snorted a lot of cocaine off of slutty white chicks' tits. I know all about smoking marijuana at parties with these kids. And I know all about how their culture is just diametrically opposed to the culture of success that is required in today's high-tech, fast-paced, extremely competitive global marketplace. Because the skills that you need, you can't just like mess up in school and then be going to community college, and then eventually you're going to transfer and work your way up. Like, you have to have these skills right now. They're hiring right now. They need somebody who actually knows what they're doing in order for us to compete with China, so that we can manufacture products here. But we can't do that because we have this pesky minimum wage that prevents us from bringing in migrant labor and utilizing them to make electronics here. No, instead, we have to pay the Chinese slaves, the Chinese fascists in the quote-unquote Chinese Communist Party tell they're communists so that they don't have to pay them money. And then we get to utilize their slave labor to for corporations to make profits off of the labor of the proletariat there in communist China, as long as these corporations don't criticize the Chinese Communist Party. Sorry, I got to put air quotes around communist. And as long as they allow the Chinese Nazi Party to come in with their Chinese military and Chinese intelligence and have access to their intellectual property whenever the state wants to utilize the private corporations to smash their political enemies, then they can do business in China. And so you can't, these businesses also cannot do business with people who are criticizing the Chinese Nazi Party, such as Cale McCullough on RSS Commentary, who regularly encourages the people of Hong Kong to commit sedition, to overthrow the Chinese Nazi Party, and to prevent them from expanding over there into Taiwan, where they actually have a legitimate government. So, this deep state, a lot of the people who are involved are doing business in China, and they are getting paid money, like the crackhead Hunter Biden, the vice president's son, under President Kamala Harris, the one that wears the pants in the White House. That guy that used to, he says that he smoked so much crack that he smoked more Parmesan cheese while he was looking for crack rocks on the carpet than anybody in the world. That's how much crack the vice president's son has been smoking. And he's been getting paid millions of dollars from Chinese Nazi Party officials, spies, in order to get access to Joe Magoo Biden when he was working under Barack Obama, the guy that was getting fake FISA warrants to tap Trump's wires. And so now they're going after Tucker Carlson because they say that he's an alleged white nationalist because he spoke out against immigration. And I am very, very, very thankful he said what he did, because I myself individually was able to determine, use data that I collected from the Census Bureau and from various other sources like the Federal Reserve. And I was able to independently come to the same conclusion that Tucker Carlson came to from this graph. Whenever you take the data and you look at the demographics of who's voting for the Democrats, their plan becomes incredibly obvious because most Democrats live in the big cities. So they want these blue bars. Here's where the voters for Hillary Clinton in 2016 lived. You could see most of them live in big cities like here in California and Chicago and Miami and Seattle. So they want these bars to be as large as possible relative to the red rural areas, because this drowns out the votes of the white people. So they don't tell you that they're doing this, because if they told you that they're bringing in a massive amount of illegal Latino immigrants who are getting human trafficked in by cartels, who are also bringing in massive amounts of meth, heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, crack, ecstasy, LSD, 2CI, every single drug that you can think of, they're bringing in larger amounts than you can dream of. Actually, you could probably dream of a lot. So maybe I'll retract that last comment. They don't care that the cartels are bringing in fentanyl that they're getting from China, that's killing up to 90,000 people in the U.S. each year from overdoses. That what they want is they want access to the Latinos' children so that they'll vote blue no matter who. That is the goal, is to make these blue bars as big as possible. And Tucker Carlson also, too, has been looking at this data. And when you put it on paper and you could see the incomes of the different races, and you can see that the incomes, they match identically to the GPAs. And you could see, well, it's not systemic racism here. This would be called a meritocracy where the black people are doing a belly flop. They're like, hold my beer. So as long as they give the black people diversity tickets, then they will they will rise up above the poor whites, because they say, well, it's not fair that black people have twice the rate of poverty. It's the white people. The white people made them smoke marijuana, crack, and sell heroin, and to listen to hip-hop music in the hood. I know I personally forced black people in the hood to smoke marijuana and listen to hip-hop music, but it is, it's not, trust me, it is not actually the white people who are conspiring together to flood the hood with dope. It's actually, in fact, the Latinos who are bringing in most of this dope through these human trafficking networks, because we share a border with them. This is why we have to have more border security, because it biases immigration towards the Latinos. So this doesn't help out the Africans or the Black Americans or the Asians, because we don't really share a land bridge there. So they can't really like hop on top of a train with a backpack full of cocaine, ride up with a bunch of illegal immigrants, and then flood past the Border Patrol with a whole bunch of cocaine while they're getting diverted with migrant children. No, the Africans would, if they were actually engaging in this too with the Latinos, that would be highly problematic. But the Democrats, they also too endorse drug culture. They don't like conservative values, because they think that these white guys who are wearing suits, who are preaching about family values and traditional conservative values, it's these people who are the fundamental threat to the godless, drug addict heathens in the big Democrat-run cities that are begging for socialism. They have not experienced any mass genocides during their lifetime, so they think that China is the benevolent giant, that they're just going to be nice to everyone, and that they're going to just transition into democracy, or they've already won. So, you can't oppose them because that's like racist against Chinese. It really is crap. So, hey, I'm going way too long on the story. I'm gonna hit this next story up here. So stick around. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe button. And see here in this next article here from Newsweek, Tucker Carlson, NSA allegations spark calls for agency to be defunded and investigated. Definitely going to have to agree with that one. Definitely should probably be investigating these people if this is indeed, in fact, actually true. If they're actually trying to do illegal wiretaps of Fox News and Tucker Carlson because they're alleging that he's a white nationalist because he's opposing the Democrats' plan to flood the big cities with massive amounts of narcotics, turning the cities into gigantic narcotic distribution centers, moving trillions of dollars worth of cartel and Chinese narcotics, killing massive amounts of U.S. citizens in the process. They can't allow him to expose this, so they have to come after him. They have to release his private emails in some sort of drip with their media plants making big news about nothing in order to cause harm, because they're saying that the white supremacy is a public health crisis because of critical race theory. You know, you're like, is this actually happening? I mean, for real, that's pretty cray. This next article from NPR: California bans state travel to Florida and 4 other states. The ban was prompted by laws in the states that discriminate against members of the LGBTQ community. California Attorney General announced Monday. That's actually what he said. Wow, this guy's insane. We cannot let these people have power. These people have been running America from up top, the ivory tower, up in Silicon Valley. Most people are completely unaware, but Silicon Valley is intensely political, and most people there vote for Democrats. In your country, where you're getting whacked by cancel culture from their politics being imposed on you via big tech's monopoly from Silicon Valley, they're on the other side. They're the ones that are walloping you, canceling you and your friends and your family, causing direct economic damages to you, starting propping up race riots. And they're actually raising funds for these race riots on their platform. And then they blame the Republicans for everything because of January 6th. It's like, this is irritating because they lump in LGBTQ all into this one package. Like, you got this monolith. It's like people of color, which is a more politically acceptable way to say non-white. You just got to replace people of color and the diverse people with the words non-white, and then all of a sudden it starts to sound extremely racist. So, I'm just really confused. What on earth gay and lesbian people have to do with trans? Do gay people and lesbians and bisexual people, do they have gender dysphoria? No. So is a trans woman a woman? Is it just gender's just like a social construct? It's whatever you want, man. Like, you can't discriminate against anybody who has gender dysphoria. But like, is trans the same thing as gender dysphoria? No. So if somebody did actually have gender dysphoria and they thought they were the opposite sex, then they're allegedly actually that sex. And then, so then they would then be straight when they hooked up with somebody of the opposite gender. Allegedly. So apparently so trans doesn't actually have anything to do with lesbians, because there's also trans exclusionary radical feminists or TERFs. And these TERFs are often lesbians, and they are not supportive of the trans kids movement, and they're not really trying to sleep with any trans people or not sexually attracted to them. So it's just obviously LGBTQ, LMNOP is not a monolithic community. We should not be addressing these people as if it's like one group of people, because we have a bunch of insane people who think that they're like lacking community, and they think that you're discriminating against their community. So now they start to get really upset because you're discriminating against the people that they know, and then they start causing all of these problems. And where the historically, I've always thought of LGBT, well, let's take out the T, LGBTQ people as being lovely people who are extremely friendly. You now, whenever you start putting in this critical gender theory, where now they're trying to blame the heterosexual people for everyone's problems, they're trying to say that it's the heterosexual parents who have to foot the bill for the kids. They're the ones that are oppressing the people who don't have kids and don't have to pay all of this extra money for the kids. So they want you to pay them as much money as the heterosexual males who are working overtime to support their family and to be a manager, to rise up so they can get that extra pay, so they can get all those that, so they can live that good life, pay off those college loans. So if we don't give the people without children as much money as the people with children, then this is discriminatory against the people who don't have to pay the bills. This is the problem when you let the weak people run the show, because it is, in fact, actually survival of the fittest here in the real world. And the people who do reproduce are actually indeed the fittest to reproduce. That is, in fact, actually why they are actually reproducing. It is why his penis is in the vagina that you want and yours is not. It is why he has another baby mama and you do not. But we need to bow down. We need to apologize for creating the Western world. We need to apologize to all of the women for all of the white supremacist white women who were victimized by the patriarchy of white males that put the glass ceiling over the woman's head, forced them to take the D and have babies. And they paid, I mean, get this. They even paid for the woman. This means that they're bad because they are heterosexual. They are the ones that are oppressing the people who've never been oppressed in their life. The reason why they didn't get the job is because of me, the straight heterosexual male on the YouTube channel who questioned their heterodoxy and their dogma. It is my fault. It is actually indeed my fault that all of the LGBTQ NMMOP people have been underpaid, because apparently gay people are underpaid. I've never actually heard that one, but sure, we'll just go with it, right? And women, we'll just say that the women who reproduced and who had the husbands, the ones that had the good life, these are the ones now that are the oppressed people. And the bad people are the conservatives, because it's not the Democrats who do this. No, it is the big, bad conservative wolf in those poor rural red states who are oppressing the black people in the hood. They're forcing them to smoke marijuana and listen to hip hop music and smoke crack cocaine. It is, in fact, actually white males that have conspired together in order to flood the big cities with cartel narcotics. But it's not the Democrats. It's not the sanctuary nation policies. It's not the open southern border. It's not President Kamala Harris going to South America, assuming that all of the people of color are just going to be nice, like holding hands, singing Kumbaya, and then she gets laughed at, says we like Trump better. No, it has to be somebody else, because if they actually told you our policies are a complete failure, we've royally screwed everything up, and we're the reason why you're poor, then people just would not vote for them. So they have to do this. They have to do it because most people aren't paying attention to politics. And the only people who actually are paying attention to politics are the people who've been around the big cities long enough to know where the centers of power are and where the corruption is. And some of the only groups of people that are guaranteed to be in the big cities are the public sector employee unions, like the SEIU and the teachers unions. So they have to tell you this story. Their entire identity is wrapped up around being the liberator of the oppressed people. Because the way that the Democrats work is they cause the problems. They blame the Republicans for the problems that they caused. They then propose their own solution. They sabotage the Republican solution. And then they stop causing the problem. And then they say that they fixed the problem, and they blame the Republicans for it. And they blame them for trying to prevent them from enacting their solution. Because that's just the way the scam works in these big cities. That's the only possible way that you can get by with this housing scam. It's because the rent is so damn high that everybody in the big cities just about is pretty much a slave. They're not going to be able to move out of the big cities, so they just keep packing in more Latinos, and they just figure eventually they'll all just turn into Latinos, and then they'll like disappear across the southern border, and then they'll be left to have complete control over the ivory tower. Here, let's move on to So, well, hold on. What states? Got to go into what states this Jack banned. So, California added 5 more states, including Florida, to the list of places where state-funded travel is banned because of laws that discriminate against members of the Alphabet Mafia. The state attorney general announced Monday. I'm not sure exactly if this is legal, because we do have free access and egress to other states. And so whenever a state has put a limit on the free access and egress of their diplomats on states in order to get retribution for a social policy, I do believe the courts might stick up here, because I don't know. Okay, so you got to look at this whole thing in terms of the Constitution, the way the original intent of the Constitution. So, I think what they would say is that gender dysphoria is actually a legitimate medical condition. Because you're saying that they are the other gender because they have so much of the hormone in their body that it is functionally identical. And so the courts are going to buy this. So then you have to say, okay, so you're having a person who has a mental disorder. It is actually a mental disorder, gender dysphoria. It's not the same thing as trans. So you're saying that the person is either has a mental disorder or they don't. Okay, so let's say they have a mental disorder and you're like, okay. So you're putting up a male with a mental disorder to compete with the women. That doesn't sound like a woman. Okay, so now let's say that the person does not have a mental disorder, that they're just trans. Okay, that person's a male. It's not actually a woman. Now, you can say, if when you're 65, that you're 15 years old and you can have sex with a 13-year-old, but you're still going to go to jail for this. It is actually, in fact, still illegal for you to engage in pedophilia if you lie about your age. Even if you firmly believe that your age was that of a child, then you would then be temporarily insane or clinically insane, and you would then not be probably competing with the women. Because, well, in order to treat everyone equally, you would then have to also too allow all of the other insane people and the other pedophiles and rapists to then play with the sports with the high school aged girls and also go into the locker room with them. Because you can't really just say that you're only going to allow the people who are trans and the people with gender dysphoria, because trans doesn't mean that you have gender dysphoria, right? So if I say, no, I am a woman today, I'm gender fluid, does that mean that I get to go into the public locker or the locker room with all of the underage girls? Of course, that would absolutely not be okay in anybody's world except for the LGBTQ LMNOP community, and the P means pedophile. Yes, it is very true that there is a problem with minor attracted people in the LGBTQ LMNOP community. They do actually regularly engage in sex with minors. Gay men regularly fantasize about underage boys. It is common for gay men to have sex with minors in states where it is illegal for them to do so. It is a common act. They actually, in California, they've actually passed, okay, I can't remember exactly what happened, but there was people who worked for state governments who were pushing to legalize gay sex with same-sex with minors and adults, because they said they can't get pregnant, so it's not the same thing. I'm not sure exactly how far they went with that. We covered it on the show twice. But this stuff is systemic in California. The inmates have taken over the insane asylum. There's no one home left. The lights are on, but The only people that are left are lunatics. So what we have to do is we have to remove big tech in Silicon Valley's ability to control our elections through election engineering, through the control of information related to elections. Because if one group of people in one area of the country is able to control near 100% of social media, then we're stuck. Our hands are tied behind our backs. There's nothing that we can do. Let's see. I'm going to move on to the next article, but hey, don't forget to smash that like button and hit the subscribe button. So I don't think they have a bell anymore. It does appear as if the bell is gone. So I got another article about San Francisco I'm looking for real quick. There's a lot of articles from today. I'm going to try to be quicker. I meant to do the first part of the show quicker, but it absolutely totally didn't happen. Here in this next article from Fox News, San Francisco poll shows 70% of respondents say quality of life is on decline, according to a report. SFGate.com, citing a City Beat poll commissioned by the city's Chamber of Commerce, reported that the poll was conducted in late May, involved 520 registered voters who live in the city. Roughly 80% of these those polled said addressing homelessness is a top priority. About 76 of those polled want more cops in high crime area, the report said. The San Francisco Chronicle reported that there's been a 753% jump in car break-ins at the police department central station compared to May 2020. While there was COVID restrictions, the paper said the thefts are up 75% compared to 2019. Quote, "We want our visitors to feel safe and feel they can park safe." And quote, Kevin Carroll, executive director of Hotel Council of San Francisco, told the paper, quote, "Anything that pulls away from that hurts their experience here. You come to visit this beautiful city and your car's broken into, it leaves a bad impression. We don't want that to happen." End quote. Yep. I would not want to live in San Francisco. I've heard the property or the rent prices have gone down by 1/3, but they're still crazy high. I wouldn't mind living there because I'm a software and computer engineer, but I don't really like their politics at all. I would get teamed up on, but then again, I get teamed up on here and they'd probably like to have another voice in opposition. In this next article from Newsweek, Gavin Newsom's team forgot to list him as a Democrat on recalled ballot. California governor's lawyers have launched a lawsuit seeking for his party affirmation to be shown on ballot papers. Oops, I would not want to be that guy. I wonder if he fired him. What else we got from California going over here? Hey, don't forget to smash that like button down below and hit that subscribe button so that you get notified whenever I go live. This next article from Breitbart, Mexican border city residents create curfew to protect motorists from Gulf cartel. A Mexican border city is seeing daily shootouts in the aftermath of a cartel massacre that killed 15 innocent civilians. Authorities managed to arrest nearly 20 gunmen in connection to the incident. These cartels are heavily armed. They have tanks. They have rocket launchers. They have large armies. They have assassins. They have near unlimited funding. You should be very afraid of these cartels. There's absolutely zero reasons with how many people are being murdered and dying of drug overdoses that we should have an open southern border that doesn't have a wall across the entire thing. Because the amount of dope that they're bringing in is insane. These illegal immigrants tend to congregate in the big cities where most black people live, and they jack up the rent. Like we've been going through a housing crisis. So like we had COVID, a pandemic. It hit us really hard, and we're reeling from the economic consequences from that. So when you flood in millions of illegal immigrants into these big cities, there's no houses for them. So you end up jacking up the price of the housing while at the same time depressing the wages. The black people in the city have to compete with the illegal immigrants for wages, and then they will blame the white people for this. But the reality is that 54% of white people vote for Republicans. So we were actually opposed to this. We actually were like building the wall. I don't know what planet you live in, but in the planet that I live in, walls are very effective at keeping people off of your lawn. But these people refuse to accept reality because they think it is a race wall, that we hate Latinos, that all Latinos want massive amounts of illegal immigrants to flood through and get their kids hooked on dope and get them selling narcotics and then have their kids die of an overdose or in a gang shootout. This is the last thing that almost any Latino parent would want. You could probably find a couple of wingnuts out there that would Here in this next article from the Daily Mail, Biden's $118 billion cabinet, net worth of agency secretaries revealed. Vice President Joe Magoo Biden under Kamala Harris, the president that wears the pants there in the White House, has surrounded himself with a cabinet worth of a total of $118 million with an average net worth of about $7 million. So the BlackRock group, which is, they manage a lot of pension funds. They've been buying up a massive amount of property all around the country. They're trying to turn us into a country of serfs. They say you will own nothing after the Great Reset and you will be happy. If you complain, it is because you are racist, you are sexist, you hate immigrants, because you don't want your population to be replaced. So they come after you. They don't want you to criticize their access to new voters, because really what the Democrats care about is getting access to the Latinos' children so they can make these blue bars here, which is the election map from 2020. It's a height map, shows you where most of the Democrats live. Most Democrats live in big cities. Most Republicans live in small to medium-sized cities and rural areas. So the people, if the blue bars get very high here, then they will drown out the voices in all the red areas, and then the white people in the United States will then no longer have the ability to have any control in the federal government. It will be exclusively ran by mainly California, from San Francisco through Kamala Harris's corrupt crew there in Silicon Valley, where they got the big tech monopoly that censors social media and rigs elections through election engineering by acting as election officials, de facto election officials, without the public's consent, censoring their political opponents to remove the Republicans from office who are trying to reform Section 230 and break up big tech. As long as they keep censoring conservatives, then the Democrats will not break them up. This is the scam. The prices of rent in these big cities are so damn high that most of the locals end up moving out. And then the people who are left are the people who are too poor to move, and the public sector employee unions and all the rich people. And they love it. They love it when they can just keep jacking up the price of rent. Because what they do is they got these startup companies. They got a high rate of failure. They all need employees. So they put a massive amount of money into purchasing real estate. They use it as a hedge for the business. And they use it as a way to attract employees. So when they do this, they end up jacking up the price of rent because they just keep selling the property and reselling the property. And each time it changes hands, they make some money on it. And as long as everybody else just continues to move out, well, then they will just pick up that property later and then resell that property again to someone else. So it's like a scam where they are able to control the industry by continually jacking up the price of rent, so that in order to compete with them in Silicon Valley, you have to have access to a massive amount of capital. And then they just censor any business that is a threat to them, like Parler. All right. Now let's go over to oops. How do I do this? Hey. This next article from Breitbart: Biden airstrikes prompts attacks on U.S. troops in Syria. Multiple rockets targeted at a U.S. base near an oil field in Syria on Monday evening, a day after U.S. airstrikes hit facilities used by Iran-backed Shiite militia groups in the Iraq-Syria border region. The U.S. military said there was no injuries and damage is being assessed. Colonel Wayne Murado, a spokesperson for the U.S.-led mission against the Islamic State, known as Operation Inherent Resolve, said the attack against U.S. forces in Syria began roughly at 7:44 p.m. local time. Murado said U.S. forces acted in self-defense and conducted counter-battery artillery fire at rocket launching positions. Kurdish news service Ruda quoted sources in the Kurdish-led Syria Democratic Forces who said, quote, several artillery shells, end quote, landed on a key oil field in the Deir ez-Zor province in Syria, close to where the American troops were positioned. The SDF is working with the U.S. military against the Islamic State and other extremists in Syria. Wow, ISIS is still there. Huh. Yesterday, didn't we cover a story from... I think we covered a story from... about Ilhan Omar was criticizing Biden for these for targeting the Islamic State. It's like that woman needs to be removed from office. That woman absolutely should not ever have any sort of control in U.S. politics. We need to figure out exactly how she came to power and prevent other people like her from ever maintaining any sort of influence in U.S. politics, because that woman is just downright anti-American. Did she go to jail or something for or didn't she get in trouble or something for getting married to her brother or something to illegally immigrate him into the United States? I'm not sure exactly how that went. I don't know exactly what they were doing. I ain't judging, but it happened. I'm not crazy. Were they boning? That's what I want to know. The London-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said Iran-backed militias launched the rockets against the American base at Al-Madin in Deir ez-Zor, an oil field called Al-Amor, is close to the base. The observatory reported explosions in the city of Al-Mahadin under the control of Iranian forces and their militia proxies. These detonations presumably came from the U.S. counter-battery artillery fire, Maratorio described. So I'm going to let you read the rest of this. I want to move on to the rest of the articles. We don't got a lot of time, but hey, don't forget to hit that like button and that subscribe button down below. I'm going to try in the future to keep the show down to an hour if I can. A lot of times I'll go on a tangent and I'll be 30, 40 minutes on an article. Not really trained to do that all the time because, there's a lot of articles to comment on. But I am going to do a little bit more tonight because we got a lot of articles. There were some cool ones. So stick around. We got some more articles. Left. All right, not doing too bad. OBS is very complicated. To be able to do that, and to be able to have multiple scenes is very time consuming. And with these stories, there's so many stories. It's like, it's hard to like make cool backgrounds. Like if you watched the show last year, I used to make these really elaborate green screen setups and they were pretty epic, but need to hire somebody on Fiverr to make stages out of like collages. But need people to subscribe. If you do want to make a donation to the show, you can do so at rsscommentary.com/donate. If you want to find this show, you can type in /issue 134. If you want to see my big tech lawsuit, suing big tech for $1.6 billion for censoring any news and political commentary in a class action lawsuit. If you want to read it, it's 43 pages, but it is actually very interesting. One of the best arguments I have come across for regulating big tech as a corporate town. All right, now going into Portland news. So we did Fox News. We got a few different articles here to pick from. Haven't done Daily Mail. Try to get a variety of sources. Sometimes you got to go with the one that's got the better picture. In this next article from the Daily Mail, Andy No, which was mistakenly typed in here as Andrew No, is the best conservative voice to be canceled by big tech, SoundCloud bans his podcast. Andy No became the latest voice banned from big tech site on June 28th, tweeting that his podcast had been banned from SoundCloud for violating community standards. Remember, I used to use SoundCloud back in the day when I used to produce techno music and throw raves. And I haven't really used it too much recently, but I will be deleting my account. I'm not really down with stuff like this. I don't know the specifics yet. Let's dive into them, but what I heard was stupid. The company reportedly would not tell him which guidelines he broke and did not provide him with a way to find out more information. Once a user is banned from the site, he is prohibited from returning to the site. No claimed in his tweet that it proves big tech is not partisan or neutral. His ban from the site comes amid crackdowns of videos contradicting global health officials on YouTube and accounts being suspended on social media. So that's not what he did. That's they've been cracking down on YouTube, like in my lawsuit against big tech. They censored one of my videos for showing that graph from the CDC that showed COVID deaths by age, that shows that children and young adults in my age group in particular has a lower death risk than that of the flu. And we've never really actually been very concerned about the flu. The people who are really concerned about this are the Democrat politicians who are trying to show you how good of a job they're doing by locking down the economy and destroying our economy, allowing China to piggyback us to become the world's #1 superpower. I would have to say, in my lawsuit, SoundCloud is not defined as big tech in any way, shape, or form. My lawsuit here, which is, I guess it's 44 pages now, and that's without my personal declaration and support. This is just the facts in the petition. What I am alleging is that big tech exists out of Silicon Valley, and also that other states have their own version of big tech. So you can read the arguments with the one-liner. Each one has a full description of it. So my argument is big tech consists of a network of platforms that are not protected under 47 U.S. Code Section 230. So 47 U.S. Code Section 230 is the Communications Decency Act that big tech has been using to censor their political opponents. So it says in here what they're allowed to censor. It's the Communications Decency Act. They're trying to make your communications decent. So it says they can censor obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable. In this context, otherwise objectionable does not actually mean anything you want it to be. It means etc. It means obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, etc. That's what it means. That was the original intent. Decent communications. What it does not say in here is that big tech can censor their political opponents because they don't like your opinion or because they want to prevent your business from being commercially viable. That would definitely not be covered under this. So what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to apply a filter over the content. So it's supposed to, it says specifically stuff in here that it says the internet allows us to be able to filter stuff. So the companies aren't allowed to engage in Good Samaritan blocking of offensive content. Does not say blocking of offensive people or offensive ideas. It's meaning people who are like harassing people, like being violent, that are engaging. If they're engaging in crimes, that's a different thing. Like you're just supposed to take down whatever that's being used for a crime, because if you don't, then maybe the state might come and then seize your property. Like if you allow a rental house to be used as a crack house, then the state might actually take your house from you. It's the same idea with the law. Like they're not here to like endorse, or they're not. They're getting by. They're allowed to utilize our copyrighted content. They're allowed to utilize our speech that we put on their platform in order to generate money. If we did not put any of our speech on their platform, they wouldn't be able to generate any money. In order for them to generate money, they need our speech. They can't just be sued into oblivion for defamation of character, because this is really what it is. This is about them not getting sued for defamation of character or libel for speech that other people put on their platform. It's not intended for political parties to take control utilizing corporate politics that bar anybody from taking political sides, like being a conservative, or but they'll allow you to be Antifa. It's supposed to be that we're giving up some of our rights. So we're allowing you to operate a business that is going to cause regular libel and slander, other tort actionable offenses to happen. And we're trading them the ability to operate without getting sued into oblivion in order for them to not utilize these laws on the behalf of politicians. Because that would be, if they were utilizing this law in order to censor free speech for politicians, then that would be a violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution. But they're able to get away with this because nobody's ever really called them out. It's one of those things where you have to be real careful with the legal argument that you pick going into the courtroom with these people, because the attorneys who know what they're doing know that you can't defend all of the arguments that you need to in order to actually prove what you want. You have to work with a very imperfect system, so they'll pick the points that they want to argue that are the most important. They'll prioritize them, and they'll oftentimes leave out large amount of the most important arguments because you don't have enough time. You got like a human being as a judge. You got to first 30 seconds. You got to make an impression with this guy that makes it so that he's likely to rule in your favor. So you got a small number of arguments that you can work on. And so nobody really tests them. So if you go through my legal argument, so what I'm saying is big tech has unlawfully censored indie news and political commentary. Commentaries news that Chinese government spies and other hostile state actors have infiltrated Silicon Valley, and they have a network that reaches up to the White House. So they censored the Hunter Biden laptop scandal that probably caused Donald Trump to lose the election. On that laptop, there's connections to what is called the chief spy of China. Look up Hunter Biden, chief spy of China. That's the guy that he was getting the money to buy access to Joe Magoo Biden, the vice president of the United States, under President Kamala Harris, who wears the pants in the White House. So in C, big tech is a Silicon Valley monopoly. So Twitter, Facebook, Quora, Wikipedia, most of the most popular web services online operate out of Silicon Valley. And if they didn't start there, then they highly likely they have a satellite branch in Silicon Valley. D, big tech is a community of families, including children under the age of 13, that is too large to moderate. So they're using AI bots to moderate the news. They're alleging that people are violating these policies, taking down their content, affecting the commercial viability of their business. And these AI algorithms end up manipulating children who are also present, who are also affected by these bans. For instance, a child who was unable to access their YouTube channel due to their parent being banned. The children are being exposed to these AI algorithms that manipulate your behavior in order to maximize the amount of time you spend on social media. So E, big tech takes on national security and election official roles. They had the Russiagate committee. There was a bunch of politicians, mainly Democrats, that emailed the big tech heads. They had a communication network So they were enacting policies from the top down that were not the platform censoring, but was Democratic politicians distributing a set of rules to big tech platforms. This is illegal because Section 230 does not allow politicians to utilize Section 230 to censor the media, because that would be illegal in the United States. F big tech is a corporate town because it is impossible to separate them as election official role. It would be a national security threat. Therefore, they are governed under corporate town regulations in the United States. G, big tech censors on behalf of Democrat politicians to censor Republicans and indie news and political commentary, and this is illegal campaign contribution. Because the amount of money that it would cost in order to do this election engineering that they're doing in big tech is more money than most of these people would have if you put all of their money combined. So these people have an unfair market advantage, and they have an inside network or a back door that the Democrat politicians can call up through channels where they can report bad actors. They have an official system for them to log in and report bad actors, and it allows the politicians to target their political enemies. This is illegal. H, big tech banned former U.S. President Donald Trump to influence U.S. politics. It was the goal. Nothing Donald Trump said was any different than what any of the other people said. Fundamentally. Sorry. What any of the other Trump supporters said. In fact, actually, what he said was probably much more moderate than most of the Trump supporters. J, big tech unlawfully censored alleged COVID medical misinformation. So if you go back to Section 230, you will see that when you look at the list of stuff that they're allowed to censor, it says that they may censor content that is deemed obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable. Otherwise objectionable in this context means etc. One item that you can see is clearly missing from this list is misinformation. It does not actually say that they can censor misinformation. The purpose of Section 230 is for them to avoid tort lawsuits for defamation of character and libel and slander. So, when they reuse an AI bot to remove content, well, that's not actually covered under Section 230, and that opens them wide up for tort lawsuits for defamation of character, like they did to indie news and political commentary. K, big tech unlawfully censored news, commentary, and critique of ballot harvesting and election related fraud. Sorry, ballot harvesting and related election fraud. They took down my video that is criticizing ballot harvesting as election fraud. They used their bot and they just censored it. and took down my channel for a long time. Caused a lot of economic damages. Big Tech censors U.S. citizen speech on behalf of foreigners and hostile foreign governments like China. All of the businesses that are Chinese owned are state property. They are in a fascist government over there. It's not communism. They have private property. They have rampant capitalism. They have the Uyghur